You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 a.m.
I'm Jessica Ettinger, CNBC. Wall Street is poised to start Q4 with stocks bouncing higher this morning after a rotten September, third quarter, and year so far. The major averages year to date, the Dow down 20%, the S&P 500 index down 24%. The NASDAQ has lost a third of its value so far this year, down 32%. The price of oil surging this morning on news that OPEC Plus may consider an output cut by 1 million barrels a day when it meets later this week to prop up falling oil prices. Kim Kardashian paying a Securities and Exchange Commission fine of more than $1 million to settle charges related to promoting crypto on her Instagram. Tesla delivered fewer vehicles in the third quarter than expected. Peloton says it'll put bikes in every Hilton-owned hotel in the U.S. Paramount's horror film Smile won the weekend box office. Jessica Ettinger, CNBC.
When the forgotten poor are in need of healing, they wait for a ship unlike any other. Mercy Ships, a floating hospital staffed by volunteers, heroes of mercy who donate their time to save lives.
Every human has the right to have a place at the table of the human race.
If you could just see the smiles that you get when lives have been changed, then it would make it all worth it.
To learn more about Heroes of Mercy, go to mercyships.org.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit beefy, or even with type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Affordable term life insurance is out there. Call Term Provider and speak with Big Lou at 800-481-1458. 800-481-1458 or visit biglou.com. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds too.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show on KCAA. We'll be right back after this message from our sponsor, Teamsters 1932, a strong union with 14,000 members in the IE. Go to Teamsters1932.org for more information.
Located in the heart of San Bernardino, California, the Teamsters Local 1932 Training Center is designed to train workers for high-demand, good-paying jobs in various industries throughout the Inland Empire. If you want a pathway to a high-paying job and the respect that comes with a union contract, visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org. Are you looking for a good union job? The Inland Empire's 14,000-member-strong Teamsters Local 1932 has opened a training center to get working people trained and placed in open positions in public service clerical work and in jobs in the logistics industry. This is a new opportunity to advance your career and raise standards across the region. Visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org. Are you graduating high school soon and wondering what to do next? College is one option, but why not consider the high-paying jobs made possible by union power? Labor Union Teamsters Local 1932 has opened a training center to get you into the high school to high-paying job pipeline. You'll learn all the skills needed to excel in opportunities across industries. Visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org.
Are you underpaid and overworked? Is a living wage and employee benefits like affordable health care more of a dream than a reality for you and your family? If so, it's time to form a union. Don't be denied the wages and benefits you deserve. Come together in a union with the power of numbers. A union is not a privilege, it's your right, and it will make a difference. Contact Teamsters Local 1932, a powerful and successful labor union in San Bernardino, by visiting Teamsters1932.org/organize to start today. Labor unions built the middle class, and the middle class built America. That's the message from Teamsters Local 1932, a strong and successful labor union based in San Bernardino that represents over 14,000 hardworking people across the Inland Empire. The Teamsters are ready to help you organize for better pay, increased benefits, and improved working conditions. Reach out to Teamsters 1932 at teamsters1932.org/organize to speak with an organizer today.
Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about as we come to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and wrapping up our coverage of the Netroots Nation Conference. One of the big events of the weekend, and I got to tell you, I've had a great time here in Pittsburgh talking about how we change the world one issue at a time. All the labor organizing, all of the labor voices, all of the people who are saying what I've been saying for years. If we're going to change the country, if we're going to change this country for the better, it's going to start in the workplace. It's going to be about organizing workers to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, voice on the job. If you want to change things, you change the economics, you change the workplace, and start moving away from where we're going. And we're going in a really ugly kind of place in this world of gig work, and you're your own risk factory, really. Now, I got a lot of responses from people in some of the conversations that we've had. Some pushback on the charter school stuff, and I'll be honest, the fact that the charter school folks are paying attention and not attacking me on the lines of, no, you're wrong, charter schools are so much better. No, you're wrong. Here's the proof of how well students do in the charter environment. That's not the argument, because it's not true. The argument is choice. It's choice. And it's other stuff. And that's the interesting part, especially here in Pittsburgh, where I look around and there are a lot of these charter schools that have sprung up. And in talking with some of the folks that work here in the facility, it is a big thing here that's really hurting the public schools. This is one of those things that when you talk to teachers, they're concerned about, because every one of them has a story, especially in my state of Pennsylvania, where you have kids who go to these cyber charters and then end up skipping an entire year because, oops, we didn't learn anything. Now you've got to remediate, and you've got to spend all this extra time. Slows everything. What we're doing, especially to poor kids, is criminal. And until we can have a real conversation about how we move in a direction that educates everyone, I've been advocating for one system that everyone is in, that everyone benefits from, and as I've said before, having the elites and the wealthy in the same district as the poor and downtrodden is only going to raise the bar. Rich community is going to say, hey, we want education that has music and art and gym, and we want librarians, and we want guidance counselors, and we want nurses, and we want things that, well, seem to the average person to be what is common in a school. Sadly, when you're talking about high poverty areas, because of the way we draw the lines, not so much common. So they get silver bullet quick fixes where privatization and profitization seem to trump all. And so that's my little pushback to the attacks. Again, nobody brought up that the education is superior. Now, I remember when I went to Catholic school as a kid, the argument back then was, Catholic school was so much more superior than public school. And the argument was that, they were much more strict and parents were much more involved. And you could make that argument. The charter people aren't making that argument and haven't made that argument. They've made the choice argument. The divisive arguments of, well, like-minded people like us. And I don't think that's what we need in this moment, because look what it's gotten us. So there is that. But today on the program, I'm going to have some labor voices on the program. Again, for me, the big part of all of this conference is that underthread, that undercurrent of labor and talk of organizing and moving forward. So we got a lot to get to. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, AFT President Randy Weingarten going to be here to share some thoughts. Back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day that Joyce Miller became the first woman ever elected to the executive board of the AFL-CIO. In her 2012 obituary, the New York Times described Joyce's commitment to women's rights in the labor movement, writing, "Miss Miller saw union membership, collective bargaining, and labor contracts as the road to equality for working women. And she believed that women should be a part of union management to make sure that attention was paid to issues like equal opportunity, equal pay, parental leave, child care, health insurance, and discrimination in the workplace." Joyce grew up in Chicago, where she earned her master's degree in education from the University of Chicago. She first entered the labor movement as a worker at a gumball factory while attending college. After graduation, she became the education director for the Amalgamated Clothing Workers Union in Pittsburgh. She remained dedicated to union education for rank and file members. Joyce was a founding member of the Coalition of Labor Union Women, or CLU. She served as CLU's East Coast vice president, eventually being elected CLU's president in 1977, a position she would hold for 15 years. Under her leadership, CLU worked as a powerful voice for women's reproductive rights, improving child care, and increasing the number of women in union leadership positions. In 1993, President Bill Clinton named Joyce Miller the executive director of the Glass Ceiling Commission. The purpose of the commission was to gather testimony about women's experience in the workplace and to draft a report of their findings. Of her career, Joyce said, "I came to the labor movement with stars in my eyes. I saw it as a vehicle for social change, and I never changed my mind." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we wrap up our coverage here at Netroots Nation, netrootsnation.org, the website, thrilled to see our good friend Randy Weingarten here on the final day. Randy is the president of the American Federation of Teachers, AFT. Randy, thanks for sitting down with us.
Of course.
So what brings you to Netroots Nation?
You know, it's the incredible activists. I was honored to, be asked to be part of it, and we need to also make sure that we can fund and this incredible group of progressive activists continue to get funded and continue to do the work that they do. And I'm glad to see Netroots Nation back in person in Pittsburgh, so I wanted to be here.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of great conferences. In fact, we were at your convention in Boston not too long ago.
Yep.
And this bringing people back together and the networking and the opportunities that come out of that are so important in this moment.
And let me dwell on that for a second, because I think that that's really important in so many ways. It's complete bullshit when people say that, the unions didn't want people to be together, that the unions wanted people to be at home. We know the power of relationships and of community building and being together in person. And that's what creates trust, and that's what creates energy. So, the real key has been, how do you do this over the course of the pandemic? How do you make sure that you can be in person, in community with each other, and be safe?
Right.
That has always been the challenge. And what is remarkable about this summer, even as the variant, the Omicron variant has been, all over America, we have the treatment and the vaccine options now to keep people safe. So, whereas there may not be mandates right now, what we know is that there are tools right now to keep people safe. Masks, if you need it, vaccines, treatment options, and all of that is because of Joe Biden's administration, making sure that they could get it out to people. And I think that's why you see a huge difference this summer in all these in-person events of people coming back together.
No, it is important. I'm waiting for somebody to come out with the sticker. Joe Biden did that. Because we saw it, the gas pumps all over the place.
Right.
Now that it's coming down, you don't see them slapping that stupid sticker all over the place.
Under $4 I saw today.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, teachers, you in particular, attacked for wanting to keep people safe. It's almost like the kid who failed biology is, and science is the one leading the messaging on the right, because if I remember right, it was about keeping kids and teachers safe, not about destroying education and indoctrinating children and all the other craziness we hear on the right.
Well, I think what has happened in terms of the right wing is that they understand, because they live in the world of anger and fear and hate, they have a sixth sense for what will exacerbate anger and agita and fear and divide. That's the world they live in. I live in the world of how you create hope and aspiration and a future forward. So what they saw, I think, and when you saw it, there was a political article and a NBC article, I think back in February 2021, that said they were going to use this period of time to try to attack public schools as a means of dividing voters. So they, Rachel Maddow used to say this, like, believe them when they say it.
Yep.
They're arrogant enough to tell you what they're going to do. So they've always wanted to undermine public education and replace it with a privatized situation. Betsy DeVos has never been unclear about that. They now have taken this to the next step, which is divide, 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 make things worse, 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 create and keep people in their tribes, create and keep people in terms of grievance. So instead of being the party of hope and the party of problem solving, they are the party of division and hate and smear and fear. And that's what they did around COVID. So, you saw it in terms of last school year. All of a sudden you had this Delta virus emerge. And so the physicians, pediatricians said, oh my God.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I don't care if you replace them or not. Just keep the policies. Keep the direction we're going. Stop with the nonsense. Stop with this. Stop it. And I'll tell you, the approval ratings highest it's been, highest point this year, which means people are, I think, coming around to the reality, moving in the right direction. Today, the president was talking about, hey, how are we going to help middle-class folks? And the line, the important line for me anyway, I know everyone was on the, capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation, that line. Good line, true, good line. But the most important line in there is, my focus is on working class and middle class folks. They're the ones who get hurt the most. There is a guy sitting in the White House who gives a rat's behind about Joe Sixpack, who cares about the ham and eggers, the people who show up, punch the clock, do the work, that nobody remembers their name. There's a guy sitting in the White House who cares about those people, even if they don't care about him. This is the monumental moment where we got to wake up. Wake up, because we're at a very important moment in history. Very important moment. This is a crossroads moment. Because what Biden is doing is moving us off what has been built over the last 40 years. The whole supply side voodoo Reaganomics, all the neoliberalism, moving it now slowly, but moving us away from that and moving us back in a direction that helped build the most prosperous working class in history, helping to reshore manufacturing, helping to invest in the future of this country, and helping working people to share in it. You know, I've been having tons of conversations with people here over the last several days as we plan for our Working Class Heroes Tour. And I keep coming back to this conversation with people about, you know, the golden age of the working class for America, the golden age of of America. What people think back to as, you know, when the country was great. And they always come back to that post-World War II era, my grandparents' generation. That greatest generation that fought the war, came home and fought the boss, and built the most prosperous working class in history, in the history of civilization, not just our country, in the history of civilization, where workers had a fair shot, shared in the wealth that their labor created. And how did they do it? Well, they did it through extraordinarily strong unions, which meant working people were standing together, not eating each other. And they did it through voting for people who invested in them and their communities. The reason the 50s and 60s were so great, if you will, is because we had incredible investment from government, smart investment. Roads and bridges and healthcare and education and things to make us better. And how do we pay for it? Well, we paid for it by taxing the hell out of rich people. And when I tell folks, you know, you go, well, you know, we're taxed enough already now. No, we're not. Or at least our rich people aren't. But you go back to that era where we think of as the great era, the Leave It to Beaver, Mayberry kind of Norman Rockwell era. Tax rates on the very wealthy were through the roof. And we need to go back to that. We need to return to that era. In fact, the top marginal tax rate in 1953 was 92%. Corporate tax rates were 56%. We used that money to invest in the future. It was a three-legged stool. High taxes on the very wealthy, redistributed into investments in our future, in our country, in our infrastructure and education and healthcare, and strong unions to demand a share of the profits that their labor created. And over these last 40, 50 years, those three legs, well, they've been whittled down to barely pencils. And the sad reality is we've been sold this false bill of goods for so long that, you know, we could all be, you know, pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and we're all going to be self-made millionaires, when the reality is most working people are just getting the short end of the stick. So when Biden says capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation, he's right. It is. And thank goodness there's someone in the White House who gives a tinker's damn about the average working person. Now, the event today, talking about, hey, how are we going to crack down on all of the fees and all of the, how are we going to crack down on how the economy has Mitt Romneyed us to death? You know, Mitt Romney was governor of Massachusetts, ran around for a long time, said, you know, I never raised taxes, but raised fees on working people more than 500 times. So every time you went to get a driver's license, a fishing license, a hunting license, a license for this, for that, whatever, you got taxed. You did, the working people. People like him, they walked away scot-free. So what Biden is doing is saying, look, you know, all these nickel and dime fees you get with airlines or banks or any of this stuff, it's time there's some transparency. It's time we start bringing this stuff out into the light. And what they pointed out is, and this is just just a mind-blowing number. Just baggage fees alone last year. Just you needing to get your luggage from one place to the other. The airline industry made $5.3 billion. Just that. They made $700 million in cancellation and changes. $700 million. Because it's amazing. It's amazing how in the real small print, way down at the bottom, and in print that you need a magnifying glass to read, they put all the details. Now, of course, the lobby group for the airline industry says, well, we're doing the transparency. It's the taxes. Because again, you got to get people foaming at the mouth over taxes. Because taxes, that's the problem. Again, distraction. Now, the Biden event today, again, talking about how are we going to help working class people. Did we have that in the last administration? Yeah, we had a lot of talk, not much in the way of action. And this is why I'm thrilled to have Biden in the White House right now. And I've said it a bunch of times. Wasn't my first choice. Was not. But doing the work. In fact, he's also come out and said that they're moving towards having the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, requiring internet service providers. Have you looked at your internet bill? Lots of charges. You go, what's that? Well, it's time we bring that stuff out into the light. Also, there's going to be some money to help, some grants to help small meat processors to enter into producing our nation's meat supply. And you go, there are 4 companies that control like 90%. And this is where, again, competition matters. And this is where conservatives, my conservative friends, remember when you used to believe in competition? Remember that? Come on, come back with me in the way back machine. Come on. You used to believe in that. You used to preach about competition, how we needed that in the economy and it was good for us. Only now you're kind of the monopolistic folks. Because you're on the team. You bought the hat, you got the shirt. Maybe we start thinking a little bit differently, especially those of us in the working class, when you start looking at the numbers. I think kind of important. I was looking at some Federal Reserve numbers because I want to talk a little bit about the Federal Reserve. And we're at an interesting point because we got a Federal Reserve that wants to slam on the brakes because rich people, they're afraid of you and me. They're afraid of working class people having a little bit of security, a little bit of wealth. And I came across this graph that they had in the One Fed report that shows that the bottom 50% of us, real net household wealth, is at an all-time record high. Bottom 50% of us average about $67,000 in wealth. That is, well above the $8,000 it was back in 2011 and has skyrocketed during the Biden years. In fact, has gone up 60% since the beginning of Biden's term, which means that the policies that they're moving on, the things that they're doing to help working class people is what? It's working. It's working. Which is why last week we were talking about, the Fed, Jerome Powell, basically slamming on the brakes, and what we know is coming is a massive recession. And they're honest about this. He did an interview not too long ago, and one of the people asked the question, how long is it going to take? How much economic pain should we prepare for? And the chairman said, how long? Well, he says, it really depends on how long it takes for wages and, more than that, prices to come down, for inflation to come down. He's basically saying, well, we've got to depress your wages. We've got to make you work for less, which means we've got to crush those unions, which means we've got to crush worker power, and we've got to make people desperate again. This is what he's saying. This other guy, Michael McKay, asks if 1.3 million jobs being lost, if that's acceptable. And Powell's response is, we're never going to say that it's too many people working, but the real point is that inflation. What we hear from people when we meet them is that they're really suffering from inflation. And if we want to set ourselves up really light the other the other period of a very strong labor market, we have got to get inflation behind us. He says, I wish there were a painless way to do that. There isn't. So what we need to do, get rates up to the point where we're putting meaningful downward pressure on inflation. And that's what we're doing. And what is inflation? That's you. That's wages. Meaningful pressure downward on your wages. And this is where you go, corporate profits are really high. We've got a wealth class that's doing really well. How come we don't hear the Fed asking them to help? And I go back to what Biden said at the beginning. I go back to that in the minute. His focus is on working class people, on the middle class, on the people who get up every day and punch a clock and go to work and support their families, because they're the ones who get hurt the most. That is a refreshing departure from the reality of virtually every working day of my life. As we have been under this neoliberal kind of push of using the Fed to, well, cause inflation when working people do a little bit better. You look at the reality. The reality is policies are working, making lives better. Wealth class can't have that. They want people desperate, pliable, working, happy to have jobs, just happy to have those crummy jobs. Powerless. Question is that what you want? And this election is about, do we continue on a course that's moving us in a positive direction? Or, well, do we give in and go back to the neoliberal supply side voodoo Reaganomic, give the rich people everything they want in the hope that their pocket's full and we get to scurry and fight over the crumbs? That's the question. So we can play the red hat, blue hat game. We can fight over who's wearing which t-shirt, or we can look upward and go, yeah, it's those corporate boardrooms. That's where we should be putting our effort. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
So looking forward to Wednesday. Yes, another episode of the January 6th committee hearings. I think, what is it, 7, 8? They're billing this as potentially the final episode, and I'm like, this kind of could be like the Who, their final farewell tour that I went to back in '89 and have seen the farewell tour. I don't know. I just took my son to see the Who not too long ago. Fortunately, they didn't bill it as a farewell tour, just kind of, the next bit. I guess they've given up on that. But the good thing is maybe we're going to get some more information. They're going to be using some clips from Roger Stone's movie where he's saying, look, there's going to be violence, that we're going to have, armed people there, and, basically laying out months before January 6th what actually happened. Kind of premeditated thinking stuff. But here to share some thoughts on Wednesday's January 6th hearing, I've asked Peter Montgomery to come talk with us. Peter is a senior fellow over at People for the American Way. They run the Right Wing Watch group, rightwingwatch.org, the website if you want to check out the incredible work that they do. Peter, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks to be here. Best miniseries since Game of Thrones. This hearings.
So what are we looking forward to? I mean, is this this is where we kind of wrap it all together? Is just another piece, another brick in the wall? What are we looking for?
I think the fact that this might be the last hearing before they actually, stop and work on putting together their final written report means that they're just going to really they're going to make the case. I think he laid out, they're going to just try to make the case again. I mean, they've already made it. They're just going to make the case again, just how bad this was, that this was a criminal conspiracy that involved Trump, that involved Trump's lawyers, campaign people, allies, all conspiring to overturn the election, whatever way they could. And this committee has generated so much information, just hundreds of thousands of emails and texts and documents. It's really been an extraordinary amount of work, and this is their chance, I think, to put the case to the public one more time in the most compelling way they can.
No, I'm looking forward to the possibilities of there being some accountability in all this, and this is where, all these hearings, aside, eventually there has to be some accountability, because what happened on January 6th can never happen again. And I want those people who plotted, planned, schemed, and carried this out, I want them held accountable. Even if that rises to the, I know everyone wants Trump to be in the orange suit picking up trash on the side of the road. But I want to make sure that people are held accountable.
Well, that's absolutely right. If people aren't held accountable, it's going to happen again. People have said historically, an unsuccessful coup, if the people are not held accountable, is just a practice run. They'll try it again. And we know in some ways they're already planning to try again. Trump and Bannon have their minions running for Secretary of State. They're running for office as local election officials. So they'll have their people in place to try to pull off the shenanigans that they tried to force election officials to do this last time. So that's really troubling. Yeah, but truth telling is the first step to accountability. And the only, we'd never even have a chance at accountability if Republicans, held the House right now. If they had been able to block the creation of this investigative committee, they would have buried the truth about what happened so deep that we'd never find it. So this has really been an amazing public service to unearth all this and show it to us, to show it to the public.
And that's, again, why I think this election is so important as well, because, if Republicans take the House, this all gets swept under the rug.
They've made that very clear. They're going to shut down any investigation of Trump. They're going to shut down an investigation of January 6th, and they'll use their power to harass the Biden administration and to go after, to try to make, Americans care about Hunter's laptop.
Because there are, like a whole series of laptops out there, as I understand. In fact, ones that he may never even touched.
Well, they've made it clear that they really will stop any effort to hold Trump accountable. They'll stop any effort to get more of the truth out to the American public. I think that's why, the committee has been working so hard, because they know that they've got to tell us what they have to tell us by the end of the year. Because if Republicans take the House, we're not going to learn any more from them. And so I think there's going to be a blockbuster written report that this committee is going to put out, probably very close to the end of the year, just massively documenting everything that they have told us at the public hearings, and way more that they just haven't. There's just no time to tell in a public hearing. It's going to be something extraordinary, I think.
So, what do you say to the people, Peter, who go, this close to the election, this shouldn't be going on now because this is just purely political at this point? What's the argument there?
Well, the argument is we almost had our election overthrown. We almost had our democracy upended. And we need to know the truth about that. And we need to know the truth. I'd say it's even more important to know the truth before the elections because, as you said, it makes the stakes very clear. It makes the stakes of, we have one party that, with very few exceptions, is in lockstep with Trump, is in lockstep against accountability, is trying to downplay the importance of what happened, trying to make people forget what they saw with their own eyes. This mob attacking Capitol Police, dragging on the steps, stabbing them with flagpoles, beating them, bashing the windows in, trashing the Capitol. We all saw it, and yet they're trying to downplay it, pretend it wasn't happening. These were just, peaceful protesters. They really don't want the truth to come out. And so I think, the fact that it's close to the election is great. Unfortunately, a lot of the Trump and MAGA supporters aren't going to watch because they don't want to know. They don't want to know the truth. They're like the la 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 la. But a lot of people are. A lot of Americans have watched the hearings, and I think there's some evidence that there's a good chunk of independents who take the insurrection more seriously because of what the hearings have shown us. And I think the combination of the hearings and the investigations in New York and the FBI, we've seen Trump's numbers slipping down, and the number of people who want him to run again slipping down. And so I think this is all having an impact. And it's not, unfortunately, there hasn't been a huge group of Trump people seeing the scales fall from their eyes with the hearings. But I do think that this sort of steady presentation of the truth, of the really disturbing truth, is having an impact.
Yeah, no, I think you'd agree with me that, all of these investigations are just, highlighting all of the criming that went on during his tenure. But, some of my MAGA friends, some of my Trump supporter friends are going, this is just piling on. This is just all political. It's a witch hunt, Peter. It's all a witch hunt. It's all just going after poor Donald. But the reality is you look at what's going on in Georgia, you look at what's going on in New York, you look at this, this January 6th committee. There's just so much that I don't know how you can just ignore what is so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's really when you have to look at this as a cult of personality, right? I mean, this is why charismatic con men are dangerous, because they're con men. They're great at manipulating people, at getting people to believe them. When you add to that this right-wing movement that has spent years telling people, don't trust the media, don't trust the mainstream media, only trust Fox News, only trust conservative media outlets. So they've created this bubble, and Trump is really great at playing on that, and getting people to believe he's their guy, he's in their corner. And unfortunately, that means a lot of them are willing to accept whatever he does, and that's dangerous. It's dangerous for democracy. And I think, it's why, as much as I disagree with their politics, I say that we really owe a debt of gratitude to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, because they have stood up against Trump. They have said democracy is more important than the power of the Republican Party, and they've sacrificed their own careers because the Republican Party's base is so loyal to Trump that they've had to sacrifice their careers to stand with the truth. And so I think that's been a real sign of political courage.
Yeah, and what does that say about the Republican Party? That's the other part of this. You listen to the Rick Smith Show, where we're here with Peter Montgomery, senior fellow at People for the American Way. Check out their website, people4.org, I believe, right?
Yes, and rightwingwatch.org. Yep.
We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Now, I understand Robin Vos, the Speaker of the Wisconsin House, was subpoenaed, supposed to testify today, 10 a.m., filed a lawsuit. That didn't happen. It's remarkable to me that, if I'm called to testify, my butt's going to be in that chair. But we get so many of these people who, subpoenas don't seem to mean the same thing to, folks in the higher rarefied era that they mean to us common folk. I think someone like Voss should have to testify about his phone call with Trump back in July. We need to know if our president's a crook or not. I think that's simple.
Well, absolutely, and it's a sign of just how much he has poisoned the party, because all these people, I'm sure if you go to their websites and the campaigns, they all run as, law and order, rule of law guys. But then, when law and order comes knocking at their door, they slam it shut. They run away. They don't, these are legal subpoenas. These are things that they're legally required to respond to. And they blow them off.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? To your point right there, isn't it amazing that the law and order people are the ones who are now saying we need to defund the FBI and all
right.
of all of that stuff? And I'm going, did I wake up from a dream and the narrative flipped? When did that happen?
It happened when they decided to put Trump over everything else, and they got convinced that all the investigations of Trump were fake news and politics, and they believed what Trump started railing about his enemies in the deep state. There's just been a relentless propaganda campaign from the right to tell people that poor Trump is the victim of all these bad people who are out to get him, including the people in the FBI and the Justice Department. But you're absolutely right. It's stunning to see all these law and order people who, back the blue, who are siding with the insurrectionists, who sent 140 members of the Capitol Police to the hospital, or who injured that many of them, who are now siding with people who are just defying the law and refusing legal subpoenas. Bannon got held in criminal contempt. I'm hoping that others who are defying subpoenas are going to face the same thing.
I'm hoping they build a special wing off of one of the more moderate jails. These aren't people who can do real time, but take them off the golf courses. Give them orange suits. Let them pick up trash on the side of the highway. Make them a little bit useful. So, last question I've got for you: the hearing Wednesday. What are we told is the focus, and what should we be paying attention to?
I think they've been a little bit mum. Sometimes they've made it very clear in advance who's going to be testifying and who the focus is. They've kept this one a little closer to the vest, but I think I would say look for new insider information. The last couple hearings, the big bombshells have been people from inside the administration who've come forward with new truth. So I'm guessing there's going to be some more truth from inside the White House, from inside of Team Trump. There have been some more, they've gotten their hands on more documents. And I think I would look to, let's hear what the committee's going to say about criminal referrals. The committee can't charge people, but they can make criminal referrals to the Justice Department. And I am fully expecting them to make a lot of criminal referrals to the Justice Department. And hopefully they'll talk about that some.
I know I will have my bowl of popcorn and be ready for Wednesday, hoping for those criminal referrals and waiting for that element of surprise. I'm waiting for one of the inner circle to be the Exhibit A witness, surprise witness, maybe Ivanka. Who knows?
That would be some news.
That would be fun. But Peter, I appreciate the time. As always, appreciate the expertise and the insight. Good stuff, man.
Thanks for what you do.
I appreciate it. Our good friend Peter Montgomery. Make sure you check out their website, rightwingwatch.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
The best way to strengthen America's economy? How about investing in America's fastest growing industry, clean energy? We're talking jobs, millions of them, the type that pay well and can't be outsourced. Because the thing about clean energy, it's all right here, American made. It means lower utility costs for families, and it's how we take on climate change. An investment in clean energy is a big win. Congress, let's get it done.
I took 2 years of electric in high school, and I was the only girl in the class there. Here, I'm the only girl as far as installers go. I'm a single mom, too. I joined the union because it gave me options for health care and life insurance so that I know my son's taken care of. I like what I do. This is the best job I've ever had. You think solar panels is more like California. You wouldn't think Appalachia would have any. It would be smart if the government would invest more in clean energy resources.
So much of what we see, hear, read, owned by corporate special interests, the corporate-controlled media, and we're told that there's this liberal-conservative divide, even though I would argue our corporate-controlled media, very conservative, pushing that message of division, pushing that message of government is bad, corporations good, so that corporate control can rule the day. And we get so much disinformation. We get so much, what we used to call BS back in the day. But today we got a nice word. It's called disinformation, misinformation. How do we filter through it all? Well, I've got my next guest going to help us figure out how we work through, how we filter the garbage and come up with good information. That's why I've asked Kate Bissett to come talk with us. She's the content organizing director over at Courier Newsroom, couriernewsroom.com, the website. They've got a new program coming out I'm very excited about. Kate, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So we see this a lot. I mean, there's a lot of, what I used to call back in the old days when I was not on FCC, radio, bull. It's just bull. Yeah.
I do.
How do we detect the giant steaming smelly pile of bull?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I think it's one that obviously the fate of democracy at this point is starting to hang on as we see more and more pushes of disinformation and less local news available to cut through for communities. I can tell you, Rick, that for 20 years I was a community journalist in northern Michigan. And so I know that as we've lost, more than 1,500 papers across the country in the last decade, and so many more have been consolidated in conglomerates, we've lost that local voice that was kind of the bull detector, right? Because we were able to have journalists who lived in the communities where they were reporting, connecting the dots between policies and policymakers and everyday life and impact at a hyperlocal and a state level that was able to keep civil discourse, keep civic engagement going. And without that, we've made this vacuum of space for really bad actors to come in and take advantage of people that maybe don't have as much local news availability, that might not ever pay a paywall, because those media outlets that do still exist, that are trying hard to bring journalistic integrity or keep journalistic integrity in their communities, are often behind a paywall. And most Americans, frankly, aren't paying for news that way. So at Courier Newsroom, we're doing a couple of really interesting and exciting things. One, we're a social first network, which means we're meeting people where the disinformation lives most, which is online and in social media spaces. And we have 8 newsrooms across the country with journalists who live and work and are in community in their states. So they have a real invested interest in seeing impact and personal humanized stories being told to help reconnect those dots.
Right.
But we have to do more than just share good information and assume. I think back in the day, journalists would say, if you tell a relevant story and you tell it well, your readers will find you, right? That's how I always existed. It was kind of our hubris, frankly, that I think partly got us into this mess. Because we know that that's not the way algorithms work.
Not in this day and age. And
that's
look,
right.
And look, the internet has done this. The costs have done this, and you brought up the costs. When I was a kid, the newspaper were, and I'm going to sound really old, but it was like a quarter. And
Totally.
most people picked it up. Now you go, it's a real investment in getting the newspaper, especially if delivered to your home. My first job as an 8-year-old was delivering the Cleveland Press in the evenings. And everybody got it, even in poor neighborhoods, because that's how you got your information, and it was tested. It was made to be somewhat accurate. Now people are getting stuff from who knows where. Joe in his basement's making a site that looks somewhat decent, throwing out giant steaming piles of nonsense, and that somehow is passing off as news. And look what it's doing to us.
That's right. You are exactly right. You know, it was the same thing where I grew up. Everybody got the evening paper. People were able to turn on their trusted radio stations, right? Even that, or their news, and you'd get Walter Cronkite. You'd get the news. It wasn't this like divided, hyper partisan situation where there are like bad actors and extremists that are masking themselves as news now, looking to create wedges and distrust in all of our institutions, right? We see it in schools, we see it in health, we see it in government, we see it at like hyper local levels, at state levels, and at federal levels. So one of the ways that we're trying to fight back against this is to build a grassroots movement of good info messengers, people that we can train to learn how to use their social media platforms and empower them to take advantage of the power that we all still do have to share that good information out into the world. So what that looks like for us is, you know, providing trainings and kind of continuing education for folks on how to spot disinfo. You know, that's important. Connecting people with organizations that are working to debunk disinfo. But then for our sort of sweet spot, we're also training people how to go on the offense, because this is the one thing that we have seen a hole in this disinformation war. There's lots of really great people out there doing work to debunk things as they happen. But there's not a big concerted effort yet on sharing and blanketing these spaces with good information, right? This is what, you know, there are certain bad actors that are, I don't even like to say their names, that have made a real industry for themselves in disinformation. Yeah. And they will say, it doesn't matter if it's true, you just have to flood the space.
No, and this is where, you know, if it gets repeated enough, it actually becomes then true.
That's
and
right.
This is the problem with you know, the algorithms, as you've pointed out, because I can't tell you how many people have, you know, come to me and said, you know, I read this on the internet, and go, well, of course, if you read it on the internet, it's got to be true.
Must be true.
And the reality is it's not.
It's not, and part of the problem is that the stuff that's getting spread and shared and reacted to in a way that the algorithms will pick it up is that disinformation. And we know, particularly for folks who are only getting their news on social media,